Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Identity Insights by Indicio. I'm your host, Tim Spring, and today I'm joined by Elijah Levine, CEO of Black Mountain, and we're here to discuss the recent partnership between Black Mountain and Indicio. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today, Elijah. If I could, I'd like to start with a bit about your experience and expertise kind of in this area. Would you mind telling us a bit about your background and about Black Mountain?
Yeah, definitely. And thank you guys so much for having me on. It's great to be here with you, Tim. Like you said, my name's Elijah Levine, born and raised in Park City, Utah. Went to the Wharton School of Business undergrad program. It was my sophomore year when COVID happened. And so during those first 2 years, I was really observing people just flock to, traditional consulting roles and IB and kind of the classic, Wharton stereotype esque roles. And I was really turned off by that kind of very much a go against the herd, go against the grain sort of person. And so I was really captivated early on by both real estate and technology, um, particularly real estate, where there was just a, kind of a vortex of very little talent, but a lot of really impressive professionals that were coming to the school to speak to a more intimate group of people. So I saw that as a great opportunity to almost like hit some attention arbitrage, whereas you'd be in a room with 300 wannabe entry level consultants with one, associate maybe juxtaposing that with 30 kids in a half filled room with the CEO of a $50 billion AUM real estate firm. And so during COVID, I ended up taking some time off Penn and working full time with a private equity real estate group here in Utah. Learned a ton about M&A, tech system automation and implementation across big enterprises. And I left out that before starting at that company, I started my own consulting business and, worked with some of the top realtors in Park City to help drive organic growth to their business through improved websites, SEO, and other systems and processes within their business. And so while I was working at that company and with my experience in tech consulting, I just realized how grand of an opportunity there was to be an early mover in this new world of technology that the financial industry is not really fully received yet. A lot of aspects of the industry are really stuck in the 70s or 80s and, are operating on highly antiquated processes and systems. And so, I really saw that firsthand as I was at this firm that doubled from like 25 to 50 billion while I was there. And I was working on a lot of those growth initiatives and projects and ended up implementing, newer, better tech systems across their existing stack of, I think it was like 15 different softwares. And so kind of streamlined those down into two or three. And even those were just not as awesome as you'd hope for as a user or an operator of those systems. And that was really kind of the inspiration behind the start of Black Mountain.
All right, awesome. No, appreciate that's a really holistic view of everything you've been up to. So I'm curious, right, with this partnership with Indicio, what is the goal for Black Mountain and Indicio to really help both enterprises grow or both companies grow?
Certainly. And it's a funny story because it started off as a very particular need for an international Bitcoin escrow transfer that we're working on. And basically, this is a very complicated deal, several parties involved, law firms, consultants, you name it. And what we were finding is that across, these law firms, these banks, these exchanges, every single one of them has very outdated and therefore not fully accurate passport verification systems, processes, and infrastructure. And so we're looking at right these big established banks with some of the most credibility I think any institution could ever have, and same with the exchanges, same with the law firms. And they're like, hey, we can like run it on a database, but we can't actually verify that the passport is real. And so we started tapping in not only to our network of clients and partners and advisors and banks and exchanges and law firms, but we also started tapping into some of our portfolio companies. And we had originally invested in Indicio just because of the passport technology that you guys have built for travel. This idea of like a decentralized and personally owned digital identity that's immutable is very captivating, and it's really aligned with a lot of research I've done. I didn't get to this, but after my time at that asset manager here in Utah and starting Black Mountain, I went back to Wharton to finish my junior and senior year and kind of really ramped up my involvement with crypto, blockchain, decentralization. Ended up becoming a leader of Penn Blockchain Club, helped put on two or three speaking events with some absolutely outstanding speakers. I actually got to be on a panel with the global head of tax at BlackRock. That was amazing. But we also brought in like hundreds of speakers throughout the institutional crypto space, from Goldman, Franklin Templeton, JP Morgan, you name it, to speak in front of all these students. And that was really insightful. And I kind of got a front row seat to, the whole SEC and CFTC debate about crypto regulation and who has jurisdiction. And, really just saw kind of this merging of a traditional and decentralized finance industry that no one really knew how to handle or was prepared for. And so it was inspiring to me where I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much opportunity here. And, similarly with real estate, just kind of started diving in and forming as many professional connections as possible. And two things that I bring that up for. The first is that through my time in like kind of deep crypto world, right, with some of the brightest cryptographers, young cryptographers in the world, right, at Penn, I learned about this idea of quantum resistant technology. Another thing I forgot to include is that when I moved back to Utah during my 2 gap years from Wharton, I moved into this incubator house in Salt Lake. And there was a gentleman there named Kyle, who is now my business partner still and manages our fund. He was an early investor and developer of Ethereum. So he was quite gifted with the computer and with investing skills. And I, was at this large asset manager learning about fund documents and fund models and the systems and operations behind all of that. And he had this crazy investing track record, buying Bitcoin under $1,000, buying Ethereum under $100, and a good amount of it. And so we kind of joined forces with his track record and my infrastructural expertise to create, an operating arm, which is Black Mountain, and an investment arm, which is Black Mountain Investments. Private fund, can't advertise that, but that has fueled a lot of our growth into our own internally developed projects, but also our crypto investing and our early stage investing like Indicio. And just to finish the thought here, the reason we were so compelled by Indicio is this idea of quantum resistant technology. Quantum computing is a phenomenon that most people have heard of at this point, but essentially it puts Bitcoin, multiple encrypted passwords, banks, exchanges, every single existing Web 2 technology, even some Web 3 technologies, at immediate inherent risk for their existence. And what we found is that biometric data is actually one of 2 known to us technologies that are quantum resistant. The second is lithium signatures, which is one of those things I was, learning about deep in that crypto world with some of these very innovative minds at Penn developing these lithium ion signatures that were, I think it was something like 200 or 2000, characters changing every one of them changing every millisecond. And, it was quantum resistant because it was able to move so fast and be so long. And enabled by blockchain. And so when Indicio pitched at Tribe Angels a few months back, we were just blown away at Heather's vision, basically seeing down the line on this several years ahead of where anyone else was. And she even mentioned quantum computing and how this is going to be a post-quantum business that has actually thought about that post-quantum world that so few people have, not only in finance, but also just in technology. And so to see like a technology business building a product for a post-quantum world for travel, we were blown away and impressed already. And then when we went into this escrow transaction and we can't verify a passport, reaching out to pretty much every single person in our network, and Heather was like, oh my gosh, our tech can totally do that. Then it just opened up this kind of Cambrian explosion of potential for the finance industry.
All right. Absolutely. So we touched on quite a few topics there, and I do appreciate, the depth of the answer. If we could narrow it down just a little bit to, the finance industry and kind of the problems they're facing. Obviously, you've talked a little bit about the quantum thing. We've talked a little bit about your specific use case where we need to really be able to verify identity, right, at the very base layer of it. So I'm curious if you think those are kind of the 2 main pain points that you aim to really touch on, or is there any other pain points that you really see in the finance industry right now that you're trying to address or that you think together the partnership could address?
Yeah, certainly. And appreciate that question. So I guess when we started our company, like the biggest theme that I mentioned was like finance industry is huge, tons of money, tons of amazing people that are really bright, but not a lot of modern technology, right? So that was kind of where I saw like a big problem opportunity. And I think that opportunity is still there, but it's shifting, right? And I talk about this a lot, even publicly, but ChatGPT, for one example, coming out and pricing so low as they've done, has actually forced like all other SaaS products to come down in pricing as well. And therefore the valuations, the revenues, et cetera, everything across that SaaS or, venture technology ecosystem has just compressed a lot. And we saw that coming too. And I actually think that's a big part of our internal success with some of these acquisitions or portfolios, like venture studio style builds that we've done, is recognizing that trend. And so I think in general, a lot of really smart entrepreneurs over the last even 4 years, like us, have built modern tech to help solve that kind of antiquated financial system problem. And I still think there's opportunity there. Moving towards, I mean, a similar trend to that was like when we started our fund, right? Like no crypto ETFs existed. And so we had some wealthy family and friends again for this private fund that we had known our whole lives and had expressed interest in crypto, but not really understood how to do it. And Kyle had this, almost decade of experience buying and growing his crypto portfolio in a decentralized way. And so those were kind of two early problems we've solved. But now that we've cracked the industry open and actually had the opportunity to work with some of the best and biggest banks, exchanges, law firms, and builders in the world, I do think that what I've observed over the last 4 years, and I'll be really strong on this point, and I'm happy to elaborate if you or anyone else watching is curious. But what we've seen over the last 4 years, literally since we started our fund, which was in, I want to say October 2021 was our first outside check. And then FTX collapsed shortly after. Is we've seen a land grab of the space by the largest institutions in the world, primarily US-based institutions. And I believe that will be for the better, but I don't necessarily think it has the best intentions or the best direction. And that's not like anyone's trying to do bad things to people, but it's more just a lack of understanding of this brand new technology. And so to go a little deeper on that, a big problem with Binance and even FTX and other exchanges that have collapsed and fallen is not only their like actual back office infrastructure, a lot of stuff we do like proof of liquidity and kind of algorithms and math equations and just like dashboards and models to help understand your liquidity and like your financial obligations to your clients, your investors, whatever. But it actually, a lot of the problem of this is in KYC, and international exchanges such as Binance don't have KYC, which for like a US bank or a Swiss bank or a group that does very heavy diligence and KYC, AML, trying to make sure that everyone they're interacting with is a above board player. Those international exchanges posed a huge threat for that. And I genuinely believe that concept alone is why Bitcoin and crypto in general has gained this reputation of like being ridden with criminals or human traffickers or war criminals or you name it, right? And I do think a lot of that is because of the anonymity that you can have if you want to custody your own assets or if you want to operate on like decentralized exchanges with no KYC AML, which is great. And I actually think that is a nice feature of crypto that has like certain use cases for it. However, when you move into an institutional world where you want to bank with someone and you want a lawyer to like, check your documents or check your systems and processes, et cetera, you don't have that same luxury of being able to be anonymous. And I also think that's good. And I think that there's a lot of value to KYC, know your customer, for these institutions to really understand who they're working with. And so going back to what I was saying is like with Binance as kind of the main example, US institutions such as BlackRock, Charles Schwab, Citadel, Fidelity, you freaking name it. It's like everyone, right? They realized, I think there was this big moment, and JP Morgan had this moment in 2018 where they actually they forked Ethereum and started building JP Morgan coin for themselves, like their own decentralized infrastructure within their company to do financial ledgers, like general ledgers and transaction management. Because that's what the blockchain is really useful for, is like organizing data. And that's like a huge thesis of our company I can talk about too. But what happened with this is like all these groups, they started doing, like I said, a land grab. They realized there was this moment, where they realized they will never be able to like create another Bitcoin or create another Ethereum or build a multi-$100 billion competitor to these new age assets that are taking kind of the world by storm in many ways. And so what they did, and this is the most important point I'll probably make today, they did a land grab on the rails, the on-ramps and the off-ramps of the industry. So we're talking wallets, we're talking exchanges, we're talking ETFs, we're talking financial products, systems, and processes that fit within the US existing regulatory framework. However, that framework, as we know, is changing dramatically. Basically, nothing happened during the Biden administration. That was a large embarrassment, I think, to the entire industry and actually put the US at risk for not being the world superpower in crypto. And that's why I think it is I'm not in full agreement of everything Trump has done, but I do think the whole like crypto capital of the world thing is important to work on. And I'm very grateful to David Sachs for kind of pioneering that effort. And I think it is really important. But that effort has actually been silently happening outside of the government with those institutions for 4 or 5 years, right? Where like you saw this whole issue with Binance and Binance US having like a dramatic falling out. CZ Binance got arrested. No one really knows what that's about. I won't comment too much further on that, but all of those issues are predicated on proper KYC that currently can only be done comfortably within US institutions and US citizens, right? Because for a US citizen to KYC a US institution to KYC a US citizen is relatively easy. But for a US institution to KYC an Italian citizen, as one example, is much more difficult. And same with, the contrary of that, like a Swiss bank, it's difficult for them to KYC an American citizen unless you start bringing the passports into it. And unless you have like a ground level infrastructural way to verify that passport is legit, which we have not seen anywhere in the world across any of these amazing tech companies that we're underwriting and investing in all the time until we found Indicio.
So obviously you said as let's dig a little bit into more of the land grab because I was unaware of JP Morgan coin and things of that nature. Um, let's dig a bit more into the rails, right? Payments and infrastructure for transfers and all that stuff in KYC. Uh, obviously the passport verification is a pretty good start, but how do you really start to get your how do you really integrate into that entire system so that people can use Black Mountain and Indicio's technology to do whatever transfers and payments and all the things that they want to do?
Definitely. And I guess the best way to explain that would be to describe like a recent um, conversation we had. And I probably shouldn't name the institution, but let's just say it's the biggest, best, most reputable bank in the world that everyone loves and uses, including us. And we love them. Like we literally are the biggest fans in the world, but they are stuck in the freaking 80s as far as KYC goes. And I'll give this prime example, right? Where, let's just call that bank base rhymes with it probably what everyone knows. But so you want to become a base customer, say you want a credit card, say you want a bank account, whatever. You sign up, you can do a mobile bank account application, right? Where you fill out your social security number, your name, your address, all that stuff. You might have to provide a utility bill. Great. You then upload a picture of your ID, sometimes in like the most modern, innovative, add-ons where like those institutions are hiring companies like Indicio, competitors that I don't think are as advanced technologically, to do things like a biometric face scan or even using Apple's technology, right? To do like a biometric cross verification with a flat like 2D picture of a ID or a passport. So there's efforts being made to kind of like bring AI and modern tech into that system and process. But what we found is even in this like recent interaction where we had to go in person to a branch and actually bring two forms of a physical idea to get that full verification. And so the current process is partly digital, partly physical. And then it's like their third verification, right, is like literally just the banker slash the principal at that institution like vibe checking or using their gut or their training to verify that person as legitimate, not fraudulent, good actor, who they really say they are, etc. Right? Because like, Lord knows that I could in theory have someone come into my house, take my social security card, pose as me, right? Go into a bank, like have their ID, but hopefully like the banker would pick up on that being kind of weird. Like something's off, right? Like this doesn't seem like Eli, maybe this isn't him. Picture's off, like the behavior's off. Something doesn't make sense. He doesn't know about like this part of our bank account that we have like many bank accounts with Base, right? And it's like, so hopefully someone would pick up on something somewhere, right? And we rely on that and we put such trust in those institutions because they have spent time hiring only the best and brightest people to do that sort of stuff. However, that is not scalable or efficient at all. And what that does is it results in a lot of lag time that locks up liquidity that could otherwise be flying around the economy, going into investments, going into the banks, whatever it is. But it's currently stuck up in this cumbersome, outdated KYC process. And that process and system and kind of inefficient overall infrastructure is not unique to the best bank in the world, right? This is happening across all banks, all exchanges, and even the law firms. And so where we've partnered with Indicio is to do a fully digital, 100% accurate, immutable, user-owned digital identity that can basically give a 100% accurate verification of someone's passport. So just to parallel those two, right? We had this like you submit your application online, picture, maybe a face scan, you go in person, you get it all kind of tied together. It's a long process. It involves going to a physical location, talking with a bank teller or a principal. Whereas our system, you do take a picture of your passport. Instead of doing just like a static face scan, you do a full facial video. So we're and again with Indicio's tech, it's not like Indicio owns your biometric data, which is the exact reason we invested with you guys. But you do your own face scan that you then own on your device, which is really important, and we should get into that maybe in a minute. But then furthermore, so you'll get the biometric verification. You are who you say you are and who it says on that passport. The passport will then be run against numerous lifetime databases to make sure you're not a terrorist. Again, something all the banks do. But here's where no bank, law firm, exchange institution that I've ever seen or onboarded to, and we do this a lot. The third verification that Indicio and us will do is actually scan a chip in your passport. So now we're verifying that passport is real, that you're who you say you are, and that all of those things match up against the databases that basically prove the accuracy of you as a person, your passport as validly issued, and as representing exactly who you say you are to this institution.
No, that I think that sums it up nicely, and that's a much better user experience is to be able to do it completely digitally, right? There's no need to go into a bank or anything like that. Just like you touched on in terms of Indicio doesn't own your biometric, Black Mountain doesn't own your biometric. It's on your phone in a decentralized identity kind of way. If you could elaborate just a little bit further in terms of what that actually means and what data is being stored, because I think not having a database to check in with is a big thing that obviously is standard right now where a lot of companies do rely on it. But moving forward, like why is that so important for your customers?
Certainly. And I'm really glad you asked that because we actually had a thesis out on a publicly traded company that I am a customer of, and I know many of my business partners and friends and family members are as well, which is Clear, right? Clear is if you don't know, it's like a way to skip the line at the airport. It's like $100 a year. However, what Clear does, and this is actually why I believe it's a sleeping giant in the public markets at an almost $4 billion valuation today, because Clear is restricted to operating only in the US because they're storing your biometric data. They are not allowed to do that internationally, and that's why they can't operate outside of the US. I don't know how much we should say further, but like Indicio has basically solved that problem for Clear and, arguably much more robust technology that the user can actually trust, right? Like every time I go through Clear, I'll just be honest, I'm going to do it. It's great. I love skipping the line, but I feel like I'm being farmed, right? Like I brought up earlier, this quantum resistant technology, your biometric data is one of two technologies known to man that is quantum resistant. And this company that's somehow related to TSA and has like a free pass to just like get you to skip the line is farming your irises, your fingerprints, your other aspects of your biometric data that is like arguably the most valuable data known to man in a post-quantum world. And so, Heather and I have gotten really passionate about this, and I saw her passion when she was pitching related to that. And so what your guys' tech has done basically is instead of centralizing a database of everyone's biometric data, and even like, let's use like the bank example, right? Like they're taking the pictures of your IDs, that's in a centralized database, right? Probably AWS, or we could probably find out. That'd be interesting. But it's like, it's on some like, it's in that company's centralized database on some centralized company's data server. And so there's just very little protection for the user. And that's why people like talk about, and I really think young people, especially, but just consumers broad based across the US are really waking up to this fact that they are being mined. Like they feel like they are being taken from and extracted from, and that terrible things are being done to them and their data and their personal private data, such as like their social security number, their driver's license number, their full name, their address, you name it. Like I get like 15 spam calls every couple hours. It's super obnoxious. And I need to sign up for one of those like do not call lists. But I just think that when these companies end up storing all your data, they think there's going to be some value attributed to that. And there probably is, right? Like there's probably serious value that is brought to those institutions by having that data, whether it's just for internal purposes and they never make a dollar from external affiliates, or if they are nefarious and selling your data to third-party data, dogs, I guess, which does happen. I don't know about like what banks or what exchanges do that, and I don't want to make that claim because I don't know necessarily if any of them do, but I'm sure that does happen, sadly. And so what Indicio does that really stood out to us is they let the user own the data. And this is like something I've talked about for years of like where the economy is going, where tech is going, where consumerism is going, is owning your stuff, right? Like imagine, and some of the big blockchain investments we've made, like the internet computer, are really like centered around this idea of like real decentralization. We actually, I'll give a quick plug. We wrote an article called "Does Total Decentralization Exist?" And we argued that in large part, no, and that even local governments are a more perfect example of true decentralization than even most of your favorite blockchains. And we can go more into that if you want to, but this whole concept of like actually owning your data on your device is such a novel concept, really. And it's something that so many consumers want. And it's something that's really important in that post-quantum world, right? Because clear at $100 a year per person across however many million people they have, I know for a fact is not enough to justify their $4 billion valuation. So where does that come from? It comes from owning everybody's biometric data because the smartest investors on the street know that that is a post-quantum gold mine, right? And so that's why everyone's attracted to it. And so it's like interesting because Indicio has taken a huge risk by not wanting to centralize that data, but they're actually thinking towards the future and towards a pro-consumer future where we want to own our data. We want to know that we can trust ourselves with our data and not some random company that we don't know if they're selling it or how they're using it and what's going on in that centralized database and how it's being used. And so I really think that is the most important thing that you guys have gotten so right. And I do think that will continue to be a massive trend over the next several decades.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think one thing, if I could just add to your answer, is also the security implications, right, of having a large database of especially biometrics that people can't really change. Keeping them on, I feel like we hear about a breach every week or other week or something like that, right, where hundreds of thousands of users, all their data's in the wind. So being able to not store it is a huge plus for both the organization and the user in terms of. Right, obviously, it's a lot less liability for the company and a lot more peace of mind for the user.
Yeah.
If we could, right, as you mentioned, kind of the future of this technology and of finance, how do you see the next, 5 to 10 years of either finance or technology really playing out and Black Mountain and Indicio's role in that future?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And another fantastic question. I think it's largely, really largely dependent on that whole like quantum breakthrough, right? Which I think is coming way sooner than people think. And we also said this about AI, right? Like I don't talk about this a lot because it's not a flex at all, but like I have been building AI models for almost 7 or 8 years, right? And there's not as much complexity to it that people think, right? Like AI could be considered like if you say you have like, 4,000 columns of news and then you go through as a human and train 1,000 of those like bullish or bearish, right? Like you just read the news, you give your indicator as like a non-financial advisor or whatever, your perception of that bullish bearish, then you use that 1,000 to train the rest of the 3,000. It's not that complicated of stuff, right? Like this whole AI moment has really captured the minds and hearts of many investors and founders. And I think it's such a joke, right? But when I was like learning that stuff like 7, 8 years ago, I was also very allured by it. However, like there's something just so like basic about a large language model, right? Like it's just it seems like in 2018, for example, I had a startup called AI Lawyer where I was like training large language models on case law, right? So it's like it's really not that advanced at all of a technology, but it's like taken the world by storm and it's like all the rave in VC. And I do think the valuations are coming down. We've done some really cool projects in AI, which is awesome, right? But what we've found, and this is a tangent, but like all these companies, right, that want AI, right? And we do tech consulting and like system implementations across businesses. And these big companies, right, like closing like $4 billion transactions and IPOs and like crazy stuff, right? This law firm. And they're like, oh my gosh, we want AI in our business and we want to like revolutionize tech. And then we engage with them and like sign a deal. And then they're like, oh, well, we really just need to like merge our 12 systems into one. And it doesn't even really need AI. We just need everything in like an operating system. And it's like low grade tech, right? And so I really think like that backs up my whole thesis of our company, which is like finance industry, totally outdated, like low grade tech's coming in first. That's kind of happening right now. You see these neobanks, you see companies like Indicio and other like kind of KYC and operational systems. You have Adapar. Adapar is a great company. You have other awesome companies, even like NetSuite, right, that are just helping put more tech in businesses. So I think that's kind of phase one, and that's like low grade stuff, right? Even AI is in that bucket, like really low grade, really low hanging fruit, really easy. But where I think the world will actually be taken by storm is this quantum thing. And people do not understand this at all. I'm not a quantum physicist or anything, but I've gotten like a revelation of how it works a few times, and if I may try to explain it to people, right? Like it is analogous almost to like the whole move from a CPU to a GPU, right? Where like before, if you have a panel, you have like one button at a time or one like pixel at a time that's going like kind of in a very like chronological manner, right? Where you have to do one before you do the other. And then GPU comes as like, oh, you can do 100 or 1,000 or 4,000 all at once. Quantum is the exact same way, where I guess the brightest computer scientists at Google have figured out how to actually have your computer exist in like multiple states at once, right? So instead of trying to crack a password, right? Say you have a password and you're going like this, try this password and then try that password and then go down the list of like 5 million passwords, right? The quantum computer will just have all 5 million passwords and like try them all at once and like figure out how it works. And so again, not an expert on that at all. I do kind of get it, but from what I've heard and the smartest people I've talked to speaking on it, my understanding is that it's going to change everything, like everything. And what that means is like Bitcoin, possibly irrelevant. I hope not, right? Like that's a huge part of our business. We don't know. But could Bitcoin get hacked with a quantum computer? Almost certainly. Could Microsoft be hacked with a quantum computer? Almost certainly. So then you start like I mean, and here's where it gets a little concerning is that right now on a state and federal level, we're really struggling not only with crypto regulation, but with AI regulation, right? Like these regulators are freaking clueless. And I invite them all to talk to me and to talk to whoever and like educate themselves like some are. But let's be honest, most of them, when they talk about AI or crypto, it is like, whatever tiny violin or the worst, it's like nails on a chalkboard. It's the worst. And they're just so clueless. And it's really sad. Not to their fault, right? Like this stuff is new, it's complicated. I grew up with an iPhone. I have the luxury of kind of like growing up around tech and learning that in my classes and being exposed to it at a young age where they don't. But that's why I think like now more than ever, young people working with older people is really important to kind of usher in this new technological paradigm. And I guess why I say I'm worried is that to that point about regulation, like we don't know really how AI, I mean, even like with crypto stuff, people were trying to register, like people were trying to register their crypto business. The SEC like was telling them, sure, register, and then like going after them for register. It's the silliest thing. And AI, I'm worried, is kind of going in that same direction. I think like the current administration is hands off more than anything and saying like, do your guys' thing, figure it out, whatever. So hopefully there's some good innovation and that regulation doesn't stifle it. But regulation is important for these technologies, right? For crypto, very important. Like people are losing all their life savings by investing it into these like celebrity meme coins, Trump meme coins, Haktua, whatever. Like that's honestly a pretty big issue, and it makes me really pissed off as like a fiduciary, like a true fund manager who like cares so much about our investors and doing the right thing and making good investments, and then watching like this random viral like fad raise $30 million from her fans and then disappear into thin air and it's somehow legal, right? Like that is so wrong. And I do think there are some guardrails needed for crypto and especially for AI and especially for quantum. But the problem is the people in government don't understand the tech at all. The tech leaders are so smart because they built all the tech that they can't communicate their intelligence and what they have on their hands to the regulators. So it's like it's like you're going to you're going to the Middle East and you have a Hebrew person trying to talk to an Arabic person and they're just speaking fully different languages, even though it's kind of the same roots. You may be picking up on some stuff, just completely different languages, no simpatico, no understanding of each other's side, of like the regulators just wanting to help protect everyday Americans and the government, workers like actually being good people in theory that want to produce goodness for society, and the tech leaders wanting to do the same, but they're just coming from such different backgrounds, such different experiences, and they're not taking the time needed to understand each other's world. That's resulting in all these discrepancies and all this dichotomy across private industry and public industry that has resulted in a lot of confusion for entrepreneurs, for founders, for business owners trying to operate in these modern fields. And so to get to the core of your question of like where I see the future going, all technology based, right? Like the idea of these centralized platforms that merge in, and Palantir is the most famous example of this. We've had a public thesis out on Palantir for 5 years, and they are a kick-ass company, hands down, like one of the greatest. And we compete with them on all the time for deals, and then they're great. But like what Palantir does, they just landed an insane enterprise deal with Citibank, and what they're doing is they're patching 52 unique Citibank systems that are all across their global businesses and teams and whatever into one centralized Palantir system powered by Foundry. That's amazing, and that is like where the world is going. And I really think that's like a good thing, right? Like I think the centralization of data for intake, management, analytics is great. But then you have the security issue. And I'm really glad you brought up like the potential risk of having centralized data stored for security risk purposes, like that is really terrifying. And I think even like Palantir as systems that, and the ones we build too, like that put everything into one system, like those are at risk. And so I really think like the merge between AI and blockchain technology, crypto, kind of like what you guys have done, where you're putting data ownership into the user's hands. You're using smart technology such as like database querying, machine learning to verify if it's a real person or if they're on a terrorist list, stuff like that. And then using biometric data, which is like the holy grail of a post quantum world. So merging blockchain, AI, and quantum into innovative solutions that are like platform based and decentralized for businesses to scale is the only answer to that from my perspective.
All right, sounds good. So we are coming to the end of our time here. I do want to give you just a few minutes. If you have any final thoughts on the partnership between Indicio and Black Mountain, maybe what you're most excited to accomplish first. But yeah, after that, we'll wrap it up today.
Perfect. Yeah. Most excited about the partnership for obviously like those internal transactions that we're working on, which is like why we built it in the first place. And that's like kind of front and center, I guess, and highly applicable right now. But like I brought up earlier, this whole Cambrian explosion of awesomeness in terms of what the software can bring to global markets is what I'm currently most excited about. And to briefly expand on that, earlier I brought up a cumbersome or inefficient KYC process holding up liquidity. If you extrapolate that to like the global economy and every bank in London, every bank in Switzerland, every bank in New York, every bank in Rome, right? Like everywhere in the world. And then you layer on exchanges, you layer on law firms, right? Like there are, in my estimation, trillions of dollars locked up on a month-to-month basis because of these inefficient KYC processes. And so what I'm most excited for, hopefully, is getting this in the hands of the Chase banks, the crypto.coms, the biggest, best law firms, exchanges, banks, so that they can speed up the processes, systems, and infrastructure that they're currently using that's holding up trillions of dollars in theory of money movement every month so that we can unlock that liquidity and get the markets moving again. And I say again because transaction volume across real estate, across I won't say stocks or crypto because there's been a lot of action there, but like real estate transaction volume is down. Multifamily prices are as like they're down 20%, which is like a GFC level correction. And that's all based around this whole concept of interest rates and other things that are going on. But I do think a fundamental layer of friction is this KYC issue. And so if this solution can come in and really remove that friction, make that process more efficient and unlock that capital much quicker, I'm really excited about that. And I really hope we can work together to make that happen.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely looking forward to working together on that as well. All right. Thank you again for your time today, Elijah. Really appreciate all the thoughts and insights that you shared with us today. If you at home are interested in learning a bit more about decentralized identity and verifiable credential technology, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, and we'll continue to bring you some more educational content. If you have any questions or specific topics that you'd like for us to cover, please go ahead and leave a comment below, and we'll be sure to read and address them. Thank you all for watching.